There is a particular kind of silence that exists in very large houses. It is not the silence of emptiness, exactly, because large houses are rarely truly empty. There are usually people in them, moving through hallways, attending to tasks, speaking in low voices behind closed doors. It is something else. It is the silence of distance. The silence that exists when there is simply too much space between the people who live somewhere and the warmth that is supposed to fill it. It was that particular silence that had settled over the Ashworth estate for the better part of 8 months, ever since the accident that had taken Patricia Ashworth's ability to walk, and very nearly her ability to eat without assistance, and though she would not have said this aloud to anyone, a good deal of her will to keep trying. She sat now, on a Wednesday morning in late autumn, in her wheelchair by the tall windows of the breakfast room, dressed in a navy blazer and crisp white blouse, as though dressing properly for a day she had no actual plans to leave the house for was its own small act of defiance. A bowl of oatmeal sat on the small tray attached to her chair, cooling slowly, untouched. She was looking out at the garden. She was not, in any meaningful sense, looking at the oatmeal. Patricia Ashworth was 41 years old. She was the founder and CEO of Ashworth Capital, a private investment firm she had built from a single modest fund into one of the most respected boutique investment houses on the East Coast. She had been, before the accident, a woman who moved through the world with the particular brisk efficiency of someone who had never had time to waste and had structured her entire life around not wasting it. The accident had been a car crash on a rain-slicked highway 8 months earlier, not her fault. The investigators had been clear about that, though fault had stopped mattering to her somewhere around the 3rd week in the hospital, when the doctors had explained, gently and then less gently, that the damage to her spine was not the kind that resolved itself with time and physical therapy alone. She had partial paralysis below the chest. She retained some movement and sensation in her arms, though her hands trembled with fatigue faster than they once had, and certain fine motor tasks, the ones requiring sustained, steady control, had become, in the months since, unreliable in a way that embarrassed her more than the wheelchair itself ever had. Eating was one of those tasks. It was a small, humiliating detail in the larger landscape of everything that had changed, but it was the detail that, on most mornings, felt the heaviest. She could lift a spoon. She could, on a good day, get perhaps half a bowl of food into her mouth without a tremor sending it down her blazer instead. On a bad day, and there had been a great many bad days, she simply stopped trying after the 3rd or 4th attempt, and sat with the food cooling in front of her, and waited for someone to either help her or to simply take it away. The trouble was that no one in the house seemed to know how to help her in a way that did not make the help itself feel like another loss. Her housekeeper, Margarethy, competent, devoted, and entirely uncertain how to navigate the particular tightrope between assistance and dignity, would hover near the doorway during meals, offering in a careful voice to help, and Patricia would say no, not yet, and Margarethy would retreat, and the oatmeal would go cold. Her physical therapist, a brisk and well-meaning man named Carl, addressed the eating issue clinically, as a function to be restored through targeted exercises, which was useful in its way but did nothing for the particular grief of sitting at your own table, in your own home, unable to do something you had done without thought since infancy. Her assistant, Belinda, who managed the business side of Patricia's life with admirable efficiency, simply avoided the breakfast room altogether, because she did not know what to do with her employer's silence, and silence, in Belinda's experience, was easier to manage from a distance. And so meals had become, in the Ashworth house, a quiet daily failure that everyone tiptoed around and no one quite knew how to fix. It was into this particular silence that, on this particular Wednesday morning, a 6-year-old girl named Daisy Calloway walked, holding a small bowl of her own. Daisy was the daughter of Patricia's new property manager, Russell Calloway, a single father who had taken the position 3 weeks earlier, overseeing the estate's grounds and outbuildings, a job that came, unusually, with a small cottage on the property, which meant that Daisy, when she was not at school, had the run of the gardens in a way that no child had had in years. Russell had been hesitant about the arrangement at first. He had asked, more than once, whether it was truly appropriate for Daisy to be wandering freely so close to the main house, and Margarethy had assured him that Mrs. Ashworth did not mind, though in truth no one had actually asked Mrs. Ashworth, because asking would have required a conversation, and conversations had become, like meals, something the household generally avoided around her. Daisy, for her part, had simply decided the way 6-year-olds decide things, without consulting anyone, that the breakfast room with the tall windows was the most interesting room in the house, and that the woman who sat there every morning, very still, looking out at the garden, was someone she would like to know. She had been watching her, in fact, for several days, from just outside the doorway, before she finally worked up the nerve to come all the way in. "Why is your food just sitting there?" Daisy asked, standing in the doorway in her pink dress, her ponytail tied with a pink ribbon that matched almost nothing else she was wearing, holding her own small bowl of cereal with both hands. Patricia turned, startled. She had not heard the child approach. "I'm not very hungry," Patricia said, which was a lie she had perfected over many weeks, smooth and unremarkable, the kind of lie that adults tell children to end a conversation quickly. Daisy, however, was not most children. "That's not true," Daisy said, with the calm, unblinking certainty of someone who has not yet learned that adults sometimes prefer their lies to go unchallenged. "You're looking at it like you want it. You're just not eating it." Patricia opened her mouth to offer another deflection, and found, to her own surprise, that she did not have one ready. "It's complicated," she said instead, which was at least true. "Is it because your hands shake?" Daisy asked. Patricia stared at her. No one, not Margarethe, not Carl, not Belinda, had ever simply named it that plainly. They had circled it, with careful clinical language or careful avoidance, but no one had looked at her and said the actual, simple thing. "Yes," Patricia said quietly. "That's exactly it." Daisy considered this with the serious focus children bring to problems they have decided are solvable. "My daddy's hands shook after